The twin red suns of Eridun scorched the glass-flecked desert, casting crimson shadows across the undulating dunes. Heat shimmered in violent waves, distorting the horizon, where the crystalline sands met the blood-tinted sky. This was a planet of extremes: extreme heat, extreme beauty, extreme danger, where only the most resilient life forms survived. Or those with enough credits to afford the right technology. Lyra Kale had both resilience and credits in abundance. Known throughout 7 systems simply as the Huntress, she wore her reputation like armor, as tangible as the reinforced exosuit that regulated her body temperature in the merciless desert. Her face, angular striking rather than conventionally beautiful, bore the mark of her profession, a jagged scar stretching from the corner of her right eye to her jawline. Some hunters paid good money to have their scars erased. Lyra kept hers as a reminder of what happened when you underestimated your prey. She never made the same mistake twice. From her vantage point atop a glass rock formation, she adjusted the settings on her optical enhancers, focusing on the distant cave system that punctured the base of the largest dune. Intelligence suggested her target was there, hiding like the coward he was. Former General of the United Systems, presumed dead for 3 standard years, suddenly reappeared on the fringe worlds, like a ghost. Alaric was his name, though Lyra refused to speak it, as if denying him the dignity of personhood. "Target confirmation," came a voice through her comm unit. "Pending," Lyra replied, her tone clipped. "Heat signatures suggest human activity within the last 12 hours. Cave system is more extensive than reports indicated. We'll proceed with caution." "Acknowledged, Huntress. Bounty terms remain unchanged, alive only." Lyra's mouth tightened. "I'm aware of the terms." She ended the communication with a sharp gesture and rechecked her weapons. The ionic disruptor at her hip was set to stun, powerful enough to incapacitate, but not kill. A shame. The man responsible for the massacre at Eridani Colony, where her clan, all 37 members of the Kale bloodline, had been stationed, deserved far worse than a temporary neural disruption. But the bounty specified alive, and Lyra always honored her contracts. Besides, alive didn't mean unharmed. She descended from her perch with practiced efficiency, her suit's adhesive grips allowing her to slide down the glass rock face without leaving so much as a footprint. The shadow hunters prided themselves on their ability to track without being tracked, to move without being seen until the moment of capture. It wasn't merely about skill. It was an art form, a dance, a religion. As she approached the cave entrance, her suit sensors detected the telltale signs of security measures, primitive by modern standards, but effective in this remote wasteland. Motion sensors, heat traps, sound amplifiers that would alert the target to an approaching threat. Child's play for someone of Lyra's caliber. She disabled each one methodically, her movements fluid and economical. The mouth of the cave yawned before her, a dark wound in the face of the dune. Lyra switched her visor to thermal imaging and stepped inside, immediately noting the drop in temperature. The walls were reinforced with salvaged ship plating clever. It masked heat signatures and provided structural integrity to what would otherwise be an unstable sand formation. This was not the hideout of a desperate man. This was a prepared position. Lyra moved deeper into the cave system, following the subtle signs of human presence. A displaced rock, the faint imprint of a boot in a patch of sand that had sifted through a crack in the ceiling. Her quarry had been careful, but no one could exist in a space without leaving some mark of their passing. The passage widened into a chamber, and Lyra paused, scanning for additional traps. 3 tunnels branched off from this central point. She detected a faint airflow from the leftmost tunnel, a sign of another exit, or perhaps a ventilation system. Promising. She proceeded down the left tunnel, her steps soundless, despite the metallic floor plating. The passage curved, descended, then opened into another larger chamber. And there, in the center, lay a man. Lyra's pulse quickened. She adjusted her visor, switching to standard vision enhanced by low light amplification. The prone figure was clad in simple desert garb face, partially obscured by a breathing apparatus, typical of sand dwellers. But the build was right tall, broad-shouldered despite the evident weight loss. A shock of silver-streaked dark hair fell across his forehead. Her target, seemingly unconscious or perhaps dead. Cautious Lyra scanned for life signs. Present, but weak heartbeat, slow respiration, shallow. She approached carefully, disruptor drawn. The chamber appeared empty of any other presence, but experience had taught her that appearances were often deceiving. She knelt beside the prone figure, weapon trained on his chest. With her free hand, she reached to remove the breathing apparatus to confirm the identity that her instincts already knew to be true. The man's eyes snapped open. Startled, Lyra nearly squeezed the trigger of her disruptor, but years of training prevented the reflexive action. The eyes that stared up at her were alert, calculating, not the eyes of a man who had been unconscious moments before. A smile curved his lips, revealing teeth too white for a desert dweller. "You don't understand the game yet," he whispered, his voice surprisingly strong. Before Lyra could respond, a high-pitched whine filled the chamber. Her suit sensors screamed warnings as an electromagnetic pulse detonated, disabling her weapon systems and communication array. The cave floor beneath her feet shifted, revealing a hidden mechanism. Trap. Lyra rolled away from the man, but not quickly enough. The floor plates beneath them both retracted, and they plunged into darkness. Lyra activated her emergency propulsion system, managing to slow her descent as she fell through a vertical shaft. The man Alaric fell beside her, making no attempt to arrest his own fall. They landed in a lower chamber, filled with ancient machinery. Pain lanced through Lyra's ankle as she landed awkwardly, her propulsion system only partially effective. Alaric hit the ground with a thud and lay still, that unnerving smile still fixed on his face. Lyra backed away, retrieving a backup weapon from her boot, a simple kinetic pistol, primitive but immune to electromagnetic disruption. "Don't move," she ordered, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Alaric chuckled softly, propping himself up on his elbows. "Or, what, you'll shoot me? I thought the bounty specified alive." "Alive doesn't mean uninjured," Lyra replied coldly. "True enough." He sat up fully, seemingly unconcerned by the weapon aimed at his heart. "But I think you might want to hold your fire at least until you hear what I have to say." "I've not the slightest interest in anything you have to say." "Not even if it concerns the real reason your family was stationed at Eridani Colony." Lyra's finger tightened on the trigger. "You're trying to buy time." "I'm trying to save your life, Huntress." He glanced at the ancient machinery surrounding them. "In approximately 30 seconds, this chamber will be flooded with a paralytic gas. Your suit's filtration system has been compromised by the EMP. You'll be conscious but unable to move. And then my associates will arrive to collect us both." "You expect me to believe?" "Look around you. This isn't a hiding place, it's a lure, and you've walked right into it." Lyra's training battled with her instinct for vengeance. If he was telling the truth, she had seconds to act. If he was lying, he was buying time for some other trap to activate. A faint hissing sound made the decision for her. Gas was indeed being released into the chamber. Lyra grabbed Alaric by his collar and dragged him toward what appeared to be a maintenance tunnel at the far end of the room. "If you're lying," she growled, "I'll make you wish I'd shot you." "Fair enough," he replied, that infuriating smile never leaving his face. They escaped the gas chamber through the maintenance tunnel, which spiraled upward through the bedrock beneath the sand dune. Lyra kept her weapon trained on Alaric, who moved with a fluidity that belied his apparent weakness in the upper chamber. "You were playing possum," she accused as they climbed. "A necessary deception. I needed to see if you were alone." "I work alone." "As do I these days, but the people hunting us now travel in packs." "Who are the people hunting you? And why would they be hunting me?" "Not you specifically. Any shadow hunter who took my bounty." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "You posted your own bounty." "Give the lady a prize." His smile faded slightly. "I needed to draw out a specific caliber of hunter. Someone skilled enough to reach me, intelligent enough to be useful. Useful for what? Stopping the people who actually ordered the attack on Eridani colony. They reached the end of the maintenance tunnel, emerging into the scorching desert, a kilometer from the cave entrance. The twin suns were beginning to set, casting long shadows across the dunes. Lyra's suit was gradually rebooting its systems, but her communications and advanced weaponry remained offline. "Why should I believe anything you say?" she demanded, positioning herself between Alaric and the fading sunlight to maintain her visibility advantage. "You shouldn't. Not yet." He shielded his eyes, scanning the horizon. "But we need to move. They'll have detected our escape by now." "Who is they?" "The Crimson Adherents. A religious sect with surprising political influence and technological resources." Lyra had heard whispers of the Crimson Adherents fanatics who believed the twin red suns of Eridun were divine entities who communicated their will through chosen vessels. Fringe lunatics by most accounts. Religious zealots ordered the massacre of a military outpost that makes no sense. It makes perfect sense when you understand what was being stored at that outpost. Alaric's expression hardened. "But this isn't the place for that conversation. We need to reach the ridge before nightfall." Lyra considered her options. Her mission parameters had been clear: capture the target alive, return him to the client. But if Alaric had posted his own bounty, who was the client? And why go to such elaborate lengths to capture a shadow hunter? More importantly, what did he know about Eridani? Fine," she said finally. "We move to the ridge. But know this: at the first sign of treachery, I will put a kinetic round through your knee. You'll live, but you won't run." Alaric nodded, his expression solemn for the first time. I would expect nothing less from the famous Huntress. They set off across the dunes, maintaining a pace that respected both the dangerous terrain and the failing light. Lyra kept a careful distance from Alaric, unwilling to give him any opportunity to disarm her. Despite her caution, she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that she was no longer the hunter in this scenario. Perhaps she never had been. The ridge Alaric had mentioned was a dramatic upthrust of rock that cut across the desert like the spine of some ancient beast. As they approached, Lyra noted what appeared to be primitive dwellings carved into the face of the ridge, the abandoned homes of indigenous Eridun tribesfolk who had either died out or relocated centuries ago. There, Alaric indicated a particular opening halfway up the ridge face. "We'll be safe there for the night." "Safe is a relative term," Lyra muttered, but followed his lead. The dwelling was simple but well-preserved, with a natural chimney that provided ventilation without revealing their presence with smoke. Inside, to Lyra's surprise, was a cache of supplies, water-preserved rations, even a rudimentary medical kit. "You've been planning this," she observed, watching, as Alaric activated a small heating unit. "For 3 years." He offered her a water container, which she declined with a sharp gesture. He shrugged and drank deeply himself. "Since I discovered what really happened at Eridani." "And what did really happen?" Lyra demanded, her patience wearing thin. Alaric studied her for a long moment. "Your clan was stationed there as security for a research facility, correct?" "Yes, standard military contract." "Did you ever wonder why an entire clan of elite fighters was needed to guard a small research outpost on a backwater moon?" Lyra hadn't at the time. The Kale clan had taken military contracts for generations. The assignment had seemed routine, if somewhat beneath their capabilities. The official record states that the outpost was researching agricultural applications for extreme environments, Alaric continued. In reality, they were studying an artifact recovered from the ruins on Eridun, an artifact with unusual properties. "What kind of properties?" "The kind that allow a person to influence the thoughts of others. Subtly at first, whispered suggestions that seem like one's own ideas. But with prolonged exposure, complete control becomes possible." Lyra's skepticism must have shown on her face because Alaric laughed without humor. "I wouldn't have believed it either. Not until I saw it demonstrated on an entire battalion of my most loyal soldiers." His eyes darkened with the memory. "They turned on each other without hesitation. without remorse. All because a single man wearing a small fragment of the artifact suggested they might want to. And this artifact was at Eridani. The largest recovered piece, yes, being studied under the guise of agricultural research. So what went wrong? Why was the colony attacked? Because I ordered the artifact destroyed. Alaric's voice grew quiet. I had seen what it could do, and I wanted no part of it. But others, powerful people within the United Systems government, saw its potential as a weapon. When they learned of my order, they orchestrated the attack, intending to secure the artifact and eliminate anyone with knowledge of its existence. Including my clan, Lyra said flatly. Including your clan. And officially including me. He gestured to his face. The man who ordered the massacre was wearing my face, using my voice, my authorization codes. The perfect scapegoat, a general gone rogue killed during the operation. Case closed. Except you didn't die. No. I was off-world when the attack occurred, investigating a lead on the Crimson adherents. When I learned what had happened, I knew returning would mean my immediate execution. So I disappeared. Spent 3 years gathering evidence, tracking the artifact as it changed hands. And now? Now it's here. On Eridun. In the possession of the Crimson adherents, who believe it to be a divine conduit to their sun gods. His expression was grim. They're using it to expand their influence, converting or eliminating anyone who stands in their way. And they're getting bolder. Lyra holstered her weapon, though she remained alert. The story was fantastical, but it explained certain inconsistencies that had always bothered her about the official report. The strange communication blackout that preceded the attack. The fact that no distress signal had been sent, despite the Kale clan's strict protocols. The bodies of clan members, found in positions suggesting they had been fighting each other, rather than external attackers. Let's say I believe you, she said slowly. What exactly is your plan, and where do I fit into it? I need someone with your skills to help me infiltrate the adherents' main temple. The artifact is kept there, guarded not by technology that I could bypass, but by true believers willing to die to protect it. You want me to help you steal a mind control device from religious fanatics. I want you to help me destroy it, once and for all. Alaric's voice was passionate now, his eyes intense. And in doing so, to clear my name and bring the real perpetrators of the Eridani massacre to justice. Lyra turned away, needing space to think. Her mission, her life's purpose for the past 3 years, had been to hunt down the man responsible for her clan's destruction. Now, that same man was claiming innocence, offering a different villain, a different truth. I need proof, she said, finally turning back to face him. Something beyond your word. Alaric nodded, as if he'd expected this. Tomorrow, we'll visit someone who can provide that proof. A former colleague who's been helping me from the shadows. For tonight, though, we should rest. The adherents will be searching for us. Lyra didn't like the idea of sleeping in the presence of a man she'd spent years hating, but practicality won out. She positioned herself where she could observe both Alaric and the entrance to the dwelling, and settled in for a night of intermittent watchfulness. As the temperature dropped and the desert night creatures began their eerie calls, Lyra found her thoughts turning to the possibility that everything she had believed, everything that had driven her for 3 years, might be based on a lie. The prospect was both disturbing and in some strange way liberating. If Alaric was telling the truth, her enemy was not a man, but an organization. Not a face, but a faceless collective. And her quest for vengeance would require not a single killing blow, but a systematic dismantling of a powerful conspiracy. Across the room, Alaric had fallen into the light sleep of a soldier alert, even in rest. In the dim light of the heating unit, his features seemed less harsh, more human. Lyra studied him, trying to reconcile this man with the monster she had constructed in her mind. Tomorrow would bring proof one way or another, and then she would decide whether to kill him or help him. For now, that would have to be enough. Dawn came swiftly on Eridun, the twin suns cresting the horizon in a spectacular display of crimson and gold. Lyra, who had maintained her vigilant watch through the night, observed the sunrise with cautious appreciation. Beauty, in this harsh environment, was always tinged with danger. Alaric woke as the first rays penetrated their shelter, transitioning from sleep to full alertness in the span of a heartbeat. A military habit, Lyra noted, consistent with his claimed identity, though not proof of his story. "Your suit system should be fully restored by now," he said, rising and methodically packing the few supplies they'd used. Lyra checked her diagnostics. Her communications array and advanced weapon systems were indeed back online, though the suit's power reserves were at 60% capacity. "Where are we going?" "University Ruins, Eastern Quadrant. My contact has established a research outpost there." "In adherent territory," Lyra frowned. The Eastern Quadrant of the desert was known to be heavily patrolled by the religious sect. The university predates their arrival on Aradun. They consider it sacred ground, the place where their founders first heard the voice of the suns. They maintain a presence there, but allow limited archaeological work, under strict supervision. "And your contact is one of these archaeologists?" "He's a xenopaleontologist, technically. But yes, Professor Eldrin has been studying the indigenous civilization of Aradun for 20 years. He's respected enough by the adherents that they tolerate his presence despite his refusal to convert to their faith." Lyra activated her suit's scanning systems, checking the surrounding area for signs of pursuit. Nothing yet, but the day was young. They departed the ridge dwelling as the shadows shortened, taking advantage of the peculiar thermal patterns of early morning to mask their heat signatures. Lyra maintained a strategic distance from Alaric, unwilling to completely lower her guard, despite the growing plausibility of his story. The university ruins were visible long before they reached them, a sprawling complex of weathered stone structures, half buried in the encroaching desert. Once, Lyra knew Aradun had been a verdant world, before some ancient cataclysm had transformed it into the glass-sand wasteland it was now. The university was one of the few remaining testaments to that earlier civilization. As they approached, Lyra detected movement humanoid figures patrolling the perimeter of the ruins. They wore the distinctive red robes of the Crimson Adherents' faces, obscured by ceremonial masks, designed to reflect the light of the twin suns. "6 guards on the perimeter," she murmured, lightly armed. "They rely more on their faith than weapons," Alaric replied. "But don't underestimate them. The truly devoted are capable of extraordinary feats when they believe their gods are watching." "How do we get past them?" "We don't need to. Eldrin's lab is in the subterranean levels, accessible through the excavation site on the western edge. The adherents avoid the lower levels, something about being too far from the sun's light." They circled wide around the ruins, approaching from the western side, where a series of trenches and carefully marked excavation grids indicated ongoing archaeological work. A simple shelter had been erected to protect the site from the harsh elements, its sides fluttering slightly in the hot breeze. As they drew closer, a figure emerged from within the shelter, a tall, thin man with skin darkened and weathered by years under the twin suns. His white hair was pulled back in a practical knot, and he wore the simple khaki attire of an academic, rather than the protective suit that most off-worlders required. "Alaric," the man greeted them, his voice carrying a pleasant lilt characteristic of the core worlds. "Right on schedule." "Professor Eldrin." Alaric clasped the older man's forearm in greeting. "Thank you for meeting us." Eldrin's gaze shifted to Lyra, his expression curious, rather than alarmed by the presence of a fully armored shadow hunter. "Ah, you must be the Huntress. Lyra Kale, if my research is correct. I've been hoping to meet you." Lyra remained silent, assessing. Despite his age and scholarly appearance, there was something undeniably formidable about Professor Eldrin. His eyes, a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, held the sharpness of a mind accustomed to solving complex puzzles. "She needs proof, Eldrin," Alaric said. "About Eridani, about the artifact." Eldrin nodded gravely. "Of course she does. I'd be disappointed if she didn't." He gestured toward the excavation site. "Please follow me. What I have to show you is not for open air, even in this remote location." They descended into the excavation trench, which led to a heavy door set into the ancient stone of the university foundation. Eldrin placed his palm against a scanner, hidden within what appeared to be ordinary rock, and the door slid open with surprising smoothness. "The original architects were quite advanced," Eldrin explained, as they entered a cool, dimly lit corridor. "Much of their technology still functions despite the millennia that have passed." The corridor opened into a spacious laboratory filled with an eclectic mix of ancient artifacts and modern research equipment. Holographic displays showed rotating images of various archaeological finds, accompanied by detailed annotations in multiple languages. Eldrin led them to a secured area at the back of the lab, where a sophisticated containment unit hummed softly. Inside, suspended in a stasis field, was a small fragment of what appeared to be black glass. "This," Eldrin said, "is a splinter of the artifact you're seeking. One of several scattered across the sector, though most have been collected and reassembled by the adherents." Lyra studied the fragment. It seemed unremarkable, yet there was something unsettling about it, a quality that drew and repelled the eye simultaneously. "What is it exactly?" she asked. "We believe it's a communication device created by the original inhabitants of Eradun. They were a psychically gifted species, able to share thoughts and emotions through direct neural connection. This technology seems to have been designed to amplify those abilities to allow communication across vast distances." "But it works on humans," Lyra said. "On species without psychic abilities." "Yes, and therein lies the danger. For species without the natural psychic defenses of the Araduni, the artifact doesn't facilitate communication. It creates a one-way channel for influence and eventually control." Alaric stepped forward. "Show her the Eridani footage." Eldrin nodded and moved to a secure terminal. "What I'm about to show you was recovered from the security systems at Eridani Colony. It was believed destroyed in the attack, but a backup was automatically uploaded to a secure server. It took 2 years to decrypt." A holographic display flickered to life, showing the interior of a military research facility. The timestamp indicated it was recorded 3 years ago, hours before the reported attack on the colony. Lyra recognized the Eridani facility layout, having studied it extensively during her hunt for Alaric. The footage showed a group of officials entering a secure laboratory. One wore the uniform of a United Systems General, Alaric's uniform, but even in the slightly grainy footage, Lyra could see that the face wasn't quite right. Convincingly similar to anyone who didn't know Alaric personally, but different in subtle ways. Facial reconstruction," Eldrin explained. "Quite advanced, but not perfect. Combined with voice modulation and Alaric's security codes, it was enough to gain access to the facility." On the recording, the false Alaric approached a containment unit, similar to the one in Eldrin's lab, but larger. Inside was what appeared to be a complex geometric shape, made of the same black glass as the fragment. Words were exchanged between the false Alaric and the research team. Though there was no audio, Lyra could read the increasing tension in their body language. Then, shockingly, the false Alaric removed the artifact from its containment and held it aloft. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The research team's expressions went blank, then twisted in rage and fear. They turned on each other with savage violence, using whatever was at hand as weapons. Within minutes, the laboratory was a scene of carnage. The false Alaric, seemingly unaffected, replaced the artifact in a portable containment unit and left. "The massacre began there," Alaric said quietly. The affected research team went on to attack security personnel, who responded with lethal force, not realizing their colleagues were under external influence. It escalated from there. By the time the imposter reached the main security station where your clan was headquartered, he had a trail of influenced personnel behind him, creating chaos and drawing attention away from his true objective. Lyra watched in stunned silence as the footage continued, showing the spread of violence throughout the facility. She recognized members of her clan, fighting with a precision that even mind control couldn't fully suppress. but they were overwhelmed by numbers, by confusion, by the inability to distinguish friend from foe. "He never engaged your clan directly," Alaric continued. "He didn't need to. The artifact did the work for him, turning the colony against itself. By the time the influenced personnel had been neutralized, the imposter was gone along with the artifact, and I was blamed for all of it." The footage ended, leaving the laboratory in silence. Lyra's mind raced, processing what she had seen, reconciling it with what she had believed for 3 years. The evidence was compelling, far more so than she had expected. "Who was he?" she asked finally. "The imposter?" "His name is Draven," Eldrin answered. "A high-ranking operative of the Nexus Initiative, a covert branch of United Systems Intelligence. They were behind the initial recovery of the artifact fragments and have been quietly supporting the Crimson Adherents' efforts to reassemble the complete artifact." "Why, what do they hope to gain?" "Control," Alaric said simply. "Absolute, undetectable control. Imagine the power of being able to influence anyone from political opponents to rival military commanders without their knowledge. No assassinations, no messy coups. Just suggestions that become compulsions, ideas that become actions. And the adherents, what do they get out of this arrangement? Legitimacy, resources. The Nexus Initiative has been funneling funds and technology to them, helping them expand their influence across the sector. The adherents believe the artifact is a divine gift that will allow them to spread the truth of their religion. They don't realize they're being used as pawns in a larger political game." Lyra turned away from the displays, needing space to absorb the implications. Her clan had not been targeted specifically. They had been collateral damage in a plot to acquire a powerful alien technology. It didn't lessen the tragedy, but it reframed her understanding of it. And it shifted the focus of her rage from Alaric to this Draven and his Nexus Initiative. "Do you believe us now?" Alaric asked, studying her with an intensity that suggested her answer mattered to him on a personal level. "I believe the evidence," Lyra replied carefully. "I believe you didn't order the attack on Eridani colony. The rest..." She gestured to the fragment in containment. "Mind control artifacts and government conspiracies are a lot to accept on faith." "Yet here we are," Eldrin said mildly. "And I assure you the artifact's capabilities are not exaggerated. Even this small fragment required special containment to prevent its influence from affecting my research team." "If it's so dangerous, why keep it?" "To study its weaknesses. Every technology, no matter how advanced, has limitations. We believe we've identified several in the artifact. Such as distance for one. Its effect weakens significantly beyond a radius of approximately 50 meters. And it cannot penetrate certain materials, specifically a rare alloy found only in the oldest Eriduni structures. Like this laboratory," Eldrin added, tapping the wall beside him. "That's why the Adherents' Temple was constructed within the original university complex," Alaric explained. "They've incorporated the ancient stone and metal into their new structure, creating a space where the artifact can be used safely, safe for them, that is not for those they influence." Lyra processed this information with the methodical thoroughness of a hunter assessing a new environment. "And what's your plan? How do you intend to destroy this artifact?" "That's where it gets complicated," Alaric admitted. "The artifact is virtually indestructible by conventional means. We've tried energy weapons, explosives, even attempted to launch a fragment into one of the suns. Nothing works. But," Eldrin interjected, "we believe it can be neutralized by the same technology that created it. There's evidence of a counterpart device designed to deactivate the artifact in case of emergency." "Let me guess," Lyra said dryly. "This counterpart device is somewhere in the Adherents' Temple." "In their innermost sanctuary, yes," Eldrin confirmed. "According to my research, it was designed to emit a specific frequency that disrupts the artifact's quantum structure, rendering it permanently inert. So we infiltrate the temple, activate this counterpart device, and neutralize the artifact," Lyra summarized. "Assuming this counterpart actually exists and works as theorized." "The existence is confirmed," Eldrin assured her. I've seen references to it in multiple Eriduni texts. As for its functionality after thousands of years, that's the gamble. And if we succeed, what then? Expose the Nexus Initiative. That's the second phase, Alaric said. Eldrin has been compiling evidence of their involvement, not just in the Eridani massacre, but in numerous other operations across the sector. Once the artifact is neutralized, we take that evidence to the Galactic Council. Without the artifact to influence key officials, the truth will be heard. It was a bold plan, perhaps even a suicidal one, but it offered something Lyra had never expected to find in her quest for vengeance, the possibility of true justice. The temple will be heavily guarded, she said, already mentally cataloging the tactical challenges. Yes, Alaric agreed. But there's an annual ceremony approaching the convergence when the twin suns align directly overhead. All adherents gather in the main sanctuary to receive divine wisdom. The inner chambers will be minimally guarded. How soon? 3 days. Lyra considered. 3 days to prepare for infiltrating a heavily secured religious temple, to locate and activate an ancient alien device, and to escape with their lives. All while being hunted by both the adherents and presumably Nexus Initiative operatives. It was without question the most dangerous mission she had ever contemplated. I want a binding agreement, she said finally. Record it, witness it, she nodded toward Eldrin. If we succeed, if the artifact is neutralized and the evidence is presented to the Galactic Council, my hunt for you ends, officially and permanently. Alaric's expression softened slightly. Agreed. And may I suggest an addendum if we succeed? I will personally ensure that the Kale clan receives full exoneration and posthumous honors for their service at Eridani. Their names will be cleared of any suggestion that they failed in their duty. It was an unexpected offer, and one that touched a deep chord in Lyra. Her clan's honor had been tarnished by the official reports which suggested they had failed to prevent a rogue general's attack. Restoration of their reputation would mean more than any personal vengeance. Agreed, she said, extending her hand in the traditional manner of her clan open palm, fingers spread to show no hidden weapons. Alaric matched the gesture, his large hand engulfing hers briefly. Then, we're allies, Huntress. At least until the mission is complete. Allies. Lyra echoed the word, feeling strange on her tongue. For 3 years she had worked alone, trusted no one, focused solely on her hunt. Now she was partnering with the very prey she had sought. The universe, it seemed, had a peculiar sense of irony. Eldrin cleared his throat. Now, that's settled. Perhaps we should turn our attention to the immediate task. The adherents have increased their patrols since your escape from the cave system. We need to move you both to a secure location until the convergence ceremony. You have something in mind? Alaric asked. Indeed. There's an abandoned research station in the Western Canyons. It's well hidden and equipped with basic necessities. Most importantly, it's surrounded by a natural formation of the same metal alloy that blocks the artifact's influence. Should Draven or the adherents deploy the artifact to locate you, the station will provide protection. The Western Canyons are contested territory, Lyra noted. The Sand Tribes claim the region, and they're not known for their hospitality to outsiders. True, but they respect knowledge of their customs. I've maintained good relations with them over the years. They'll allow safe passage if you follow my instructions precisely. Eldrin provided them with detailed maps and specific protocols for interacting with the Sand Tribes, complex greeting rituals, tokens of respect to be offered, taboos to be avoided. The xenopaleontologist's knowledge was impressively comprehensive, a testament to decades of fieldwork. You should leave at dusk, he advised. The adherents reduced their patrols during the transition from day to night, believing it to be a sacred time, when the sun's influence mingles with that of the distant stars. And you, Alaric asked, will you join us at the research station? Eldrin shook his head. I must maintain my presence here. Any deviation from my normal routine would arouse suspicion. I'll join you at the temple on the day of the convergence, ostensibly to observe the ceremony as part of my cultural studies. The plan had merit, Lyra had to admit. And while skepticism remained her default state, the evidence she had seen was compelling enough to warrant cooperation, at least for now. They spent the remaining hours of daylight reviewing the layout of the Adherence Temple, which Eldrin had meticulously mapped during his cultural observations. The temple's design was complex, a blend of ancient Araduni architecture and newer religious additions with multiple levels both above and below ground. The artifact is kept here. Eldrin indicated a chamber deep within the structure. The Hall of Whispers, they call it. Only the high adherent and selected acolytes are permitted entry. And the counterpart device? Lyra asked. According to my research, it should be located in what was originally a security control room for the university here. He pointed to a smaller chamber adjacent to the Hall of Whispers. The adherents have repurposed it as a reliquary for items they believe channel the sun's wisdom. Convenient, Alaric murmured. Indeed. The adherents' belief system has inadvertently preserved much of the original Eriduni technology, albeit misunderstood as religious artifacts rather than scientific instruments. As the twin suns began their descent toward the horizon, Lyra and Alaric prepared to depart. Eldrin provided them with desert robes to wear over their more distinctive attire. Lyra's hunter suit and Alaric's military-style clothing would attract unwanted attention from both adherents and sand tribes. These comlinks are shielded against detection, Eldrin said, handing each of them a small device that resembled a decorative ear cuff. Use them only in emergency. All communication channels are likely monitored by both the adherents and the Nexus Initiative. Lyra secured the comlink, appreciating its discreet design. If something goes wrong, if we don't make it to the temple, I'll proceed with exposing what evidence we have, Eldrin assured her. It won't be as compelling without the neutralized artifact, but it may be enough to prompt an official investigation. It was a small comfort, but better than nothing. Lyra nodded her thanks. They exited the laboratory through a different passage than the one they had entered, emerging from a concealed door at the base of a derelict observatory tower. The fading light cast long shadows across the university ruins, providing natural cover for their departure. Remember, Eldrin said as they prepared to leave, the Sand Tribes value truth above all else. They believe lies disrupt the harmony of the desert. If questioned, answer, honestly or not at all. Even if the truth reveals our purpose, Alaric asked. Especially then. They have no love for the adherents who have tried repeatedly to convert them by force. They may even provide assistance if they deem your cause worthy. With final instructions exchanged and contingency plans established, Lyra and Alaric departed the university ruins, moving swiftly across the cooling sands toward the distant canyons, visible as a darker line against the horizon. They traveled in silence for the first hour, each absorbed in their own thoughts. Lyra found herself studying Alaric's movement patterns, noting the military precision in his gait, the constant awareness of his surroundings that marked him as a trained combatant. Not the movement of a political figurehead, but of a field officer accustomed to direct action. It lent credence to his story. A man who had risen to the rank of general through political maneuvering, rather than combat experience, would not move, as Alaric did, with the economy and alertness of a veteran soldier. As darkness fell completely, the temperature plummeted, a common phenomenon in desert environments. Lyra's suit adjusted automatically, but she noticed Alaric pulling his desert robe tighter around his shoulders. Your thermal regulation system is malfunctioning, she observed. I don't have one, he replied. Standard military implants were removed during my disappearance, too easily tracked. Lyra considered this, then adjusted her suit's external temperature projection to create a pocket of warmer air that extended to include Alaric. It was a feature designed for protecting vulnerable targets during extraction missions, not for the comfort of alleged war criminals, but practicality demanded that her temporary ally remain in optimal condition. Thank you, Alaric said clearly, noting the change, but not commenting directly on it. Don't mistake it for trust, Lyra replied. I need you functional. A small smile curved his lips visible in the dim illumination of Aradun's 3 moons, which had risen to replace the suns. Of course, strictly practical. They continued through the night, navigating by the stars and Lyra's enhanced guidance systems. The landscape gradually transformed from the rolling dunes of the central desert to the more varied terrain of the canyon region rock formations, jutting from the sand patches of hardy vegetation clinging to the meager moisture found in the shadows of stone outcroppings. It was during their brief rest at one such outcropping that they encountered the first Sand Tribe patrol. They appeared silently from the darkness, 3 figures mounted on desert striders, tall avian creatures adapted for swift movement across sand. The tribespeople were wrapped in layers of tightly woven fabric faces, obscured except for their eyes, which gleamed with an iridescent quality that suggested non-human ancestry. Each carried a long, curved spear that hummed faintly with embedded technology. Lyra and Alaric rose slowly, hands visible in the non-threatening posture Eldrin had described. Alaric stepped forward and performed the greeting ritual with impressive accuracy, a series of specific gestures combined with phrases in the ancient Eriduni dialect that the tribes preserved. The lead rider dismounted and approached spear lowered, but not deactivated. They studied the 2 outsiders with obvious suspicion, then responded with a more complex variation of the greeting, clearly testing Alaric's knowledge. He hesitated only briefly before answering correctly, adding the token phrase that identified them as associates of Professor Eldrin. The rider's posture relaxed marginally. They spoke in heavily accented standard. "Eldrin friend sends you to the old sky place." "Yes," Alaric confirmed. "We seek sanctuary until the convergence." The rider conferred briefly with their companions in their native language, then returned their attention to Alaric and Lyra. "We guide you past the watching eyes. Then, you follow the stone path alone." They pointed to a narrow trail barely visible among the rock formations. "Adherent patrols thick like syrup tonight, searching with machine eyes and spirit sense." Spirit sense, the tribe's term for the artifact's influence, Lyra realized. "They're using the artifact to search for us." The rider nodded, the gesture made more emphatic by the elaborate headdress they wore. Sun speakers grow desperate. They know outsiders in their territory, outsiders who resist the whisper call. They tapped their head meaningfully. "You have strong minds or strong protection?" "Both," Alaric said simply. This seemed to satisfy the rider. They whistled and 2 more striders emerged from the darkness, riderless, and clearly intended for Lyra and Alaric. "Mount, follow, speak only when spoken to." The striders were temperamental creatures, known for their intelligence and stubborn nature. Lyra had ridden them before on previous hunts and knew to approach with confident respect. She mounted smoothly, adjusting her position to accommodate the creature's unique gait. Alaric, she noted with some surprise, handled his mount with equal skill. When he caught her watching, he shrugged. 3 years in the desert. You adapt or you die." The Sand Tribe escort led them through a complex network of narrow canyon passages, some so tight that they had to proceed in single file, the striders picking their way carefully over loose stone. Twice, they stopped and waited in tense silence as adherent patrols passed overhead, anti-gravity skiffs, humming softly as they scanned the canyons with searchlights. "They cannot see through the stone veil," their guide assured them in a whisper, as one patrol lingered particularly long. "Old magic in the rocks. Blocks eyes, blocks whispers." Lyra's suit analysis confirmed this in more scientific terms. The natural rock formations in this area contained high concentrations of the rare metal alloy Eldrin had mentioned, effectively creating a shield against both conventional scanning technology and, presumably, the artifact's influence. After nearly 2 hours of tense travel, they emerged into a small, hidden valley nestled within the canyon system. At its center stood a structure that clearly originated off-world, a prefabricated research station, its once pristine white exterior now weathered to a sandy beige that blended with the surrounding environment. "Sky Place," the guide announced, gesturing toward the station. Tribe watches from distance, no closer. They pointed to carved symbols surrounding the valley. Old boundaries, we respect. Thank you for your guidance, Alaric said, formally dismounting and offering the ritual farewell gesture. The guide acknowledged with a short nod, then added, "When red eyes join in sky, we join battle against sunspeakers. Old promise renewed." With that cryptic statement, the Sand Tribe members reclaimed their striders and disappeared back into the canyon network, leaving Lyra and Alaric alone in the hidden valley. What did they mean by joining battle? Lyra asked, as they approached the research station. I'm not entirely sure, Alaric admitted. But I suspect the Sand Tribes have their own grievances against the adherents. They may be planning some action during the convergence ceremony. Potential allies or a complication. Both, most likely. But we should focus on our primary objective. Whatever the tribes are planning, we need to be prepared to adapt. The research station was powered down, but not abandoned. As they approached, proximity sensors activated, illuminating a path to the main entrance. Alaric entered a complex code on the access panel, and the door slid open with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. Inside, emergency lighting activated automatically, revealing a compact but well-equipped facility. The main room contained research terminals, sample analysis equipment, and what appeared to be specialized scanning devices designed for archaeological work. Adjoining rooms held sleeping quarters, sanitation facilities, and a small medical bay. Eldrin maintained this place as a backup site. Alaric explained, activating the station's power systems. When the university administration became increasingly influenced by the adherents, he transferred critical research here. Lyra conducted a perimeter check, her hunter's instincts, unwilling to accept security without verification. The station's defensive systems were modest, but functional motion sensors, energy shields, and a simple but effective alarm system linked to what appeared to be disruptor turrets disguised as research equipment. Satisfied that their temporary sanctuary was adequately protected, she returned to the main room, where Alaric had accessed one of the research terminals. "What are you looking for?" she asked, removing her desert robe, but keeping her suit powered and ready. More information on the counterpart device. Eldrin mentioned he had stored his most sensitive research here, including detailed scans of Eriduni artifacts that might help us identify and activate it. Lyra glanced over his shoulder at the display, which showed rotating holographic models of various artifacts, each accompanied by dense text in multiple languages. "You read ancient Eriduni?" she asked, surprised. "Enough to recognize key terms. Military intelligence training included xenolinguistics. And I've had 3 years to improve my skills." He continued scrolling through the database, pausing occasionally to examine an artifact more closely. Lyra found herself studying him, instead of the displays, noting the focused intensity of his expression, the methodical approach to his search. Not the actions of a madman or a power-hungry warmonger, but of a disciplined intelligence operative pursuing a specific objective. It was becoming increasingly difficult to reconcile this man with the monster she had constructed in her mind over 3 years of hunting. "Here," Alaric said, finally enlarging a holographic image of what appeared to be a small, cylindrical device marked with intricate geometric patterns similar to those on the artifact fragment they had seen in Eldrin's lab. The silencer, according to Eldrin's translation, designed to neutralize the Whisperer, their name for the artifact, in case its influence became uncontrollable. Lyra studied the image. "How does it work?" "It emits a specific frequency that disrupts the quantum resonance of the artifact. Essentially, it creates a localized field that prevents the artifact from establishing the neural connections necessary for influence. And it needs to be activated in proximity to the artifact. Within 5 meters, according to these notes. Close enough to be effective, far enough to avoid immediate detection by those under the artifact's influence." Lyra considered the tactical implications. "We'll need to split up then. One of us secures the counterpart device while the other creates a diversion to draw attention away from the Hall of Whispers." Alaric nodded slowly. "A sound strategy, but with significant risks. Whoever retrieves the counterpart device will need to enter the Hall of Whispers alone, potentially facing multiple adherents under the artifact's direct influence. "I'll do it," Lyra said without hesitation. "My suit provides some protection against psychic influence, and I have specialized training in resistance techniques." "I was going to volunteer myself," Alaric admitted, "but your capabilities are better suited to the task." He studied the station's layout. "We should rest while we can. We have 2 days until the convergence ceremony, and we'll need to depart tomorrow night to reach the temple in time to position ourselves before the ceremony begins." Lyra agreed, though the prospect of relaxing her vigilance around Alaric still felt unnatural. She selected the sleeping quarters, farthest from the main room, positioning herself to maintain clear sight lines to both the exit and Alaric's chosen quarters. As she prepared for rest, removing only the exterior components of her hunting suit, she found her thoughts returning to the footage of the Eridani massacre. If what she had seen was genuine, and her professional assessment suggested it was, then the foundation of her quest for vengeance had been built on false information. The realization was both destabilizing and liberating. For 3 years, her existence had been defined by a single purpose: find Alaric, make him pay for the destruction of her clan. Now, that purpose had been replaced by a more complex objective: destroy the artifact, expose the true perpetrators, restore her clan's honor. And Alaric, far from being her target, was now her ally in this mission. Sleep came fitfully interrupted by the persistent vigilance that had kept her alive through years of hunting. Each time she woke, she checked the station's security feeds, confirming that Alaric remained in his assigned quarters, that the perimeter remained secure. By morning, determined by the station's chronometer, rather than the sun's, which were barely visible through the narrow canyon opening above, Lyra had managed only a few hours of fragmented rest. She rose, reactivated her suit's full systems, and moved to the main room to find Alaric already awake and reviewing data on the temple layout. "Sleep well?" he asked without looking up from the display. "Well enough," she lied, unwilling to admit vulnerability. "Any updates from Eldrin?" "Nothing direct, but the station received an automated data packet during the night. Updated security protocols for the temple, including patrol schedules for the convergence ceremony." He gestured to a secondary display, showing a detailed timeline. "The good news is that security in the inner sanctum will be minimal during the height of the ceremony as expected. The bad news is that they've added new verification protocols for access to the reliquary." "Biometric?" "Fortunately, no. A physical key carried by the High Adherent and his 3 principal acolytes. But it changes the approach. We can't simply slip in unnoticed. We'll need to obtain one of those keys." Lyra studied the new information, her tactical mind immediately constructing and discarding various scenarios. "The acolytes will be easier targets than the High Adherent. We identify one, isolate them, acquire the key." "Agreed. And I think I know which one to target." Alaric highlighted one of the figures in the ceremonial procession order. "Third, Acolyte Varus. According to Eldrin's notes, she's responsible for preparing the reliquary before the ceremony, which means she'll access it while the others are occupied with public rituals." "Do we have an image, physical description?" Alaric manipulated the display, bringing up a still image, captured from what appeared to be surveillance footage. The third acolyte was younger than Lyra had expected. Her features, partially obscured by the traditional adherent face markings, but recognizably human, with distinctive pale eyes and a thin scar bisecting her left eyebrow. "She accesses the reliquary here." Alaric continued, indicating a point on the temple schematic approximately 2 hours before the ceremony begins. "That's our window." They spent the remainder of the day refining their plan, analyzing contingencies, and preparing the limited equipment they had available. The research station contained some useful items: communication jammers, distraction devices designed to temporarily confuse sensor systems, even a set of replica adherent ceremonial robes that Eldrin had apparently acquired for his cultural studies. As the twin suns reached their zenith, barely visible through the narrow gap above the canyon, Lyra performed her pre-mission rituals, checking and rechecking her weapons, running diagnostics on her suit systems, mentally rehearsing each step of the plan. Alaric, she noted, had his own preparations. He spent an hour in deep meditation, followed by a series of precise physical exercises that she recognized as military combat readiness drills. The disciplined routine impressed her despite herself. "You maintain these practices even after 3 years in hiding," she observed as he completed the sequence. "Discipline kept me alive and sane," he replied simply. "When everything else was taken from me, my identity, my purpose, my honor, I still had this. The patterns, the routines." There was something in his voice, a complex emotion that resonated with Lyra's own experience. The loss of her clan had similarly stripped her of identity, leaving only the hunter's discipline and the quest for vengeance. What would remain when that quest was complete, or transformed as it now seemed to be? The question lingered as they made final preparations, gathering the equipment they would need and securing the research station for their absence. According to the plan, they would travel to the temple under cover of darkness, using the canyons for concealment as long as possible, before crossing the more exposed dunes near the university ruins. As the sons began their descent, Alaric received a final transmission from Eldrin, confirmation that he was in position at the temple, ostensibly preparing to observe the convergence ceremony as part of his cultural studies. The professor reported increased security, but no indications that their presence in the region had been detected. One additional note of interest, Eldrin's message concluded. "A new delegation has arrived at the temple, officials from off-world, allegedly diplomatic observers, but matching known descriptions of Nexus Initiative operatives. Draven is not among them, but their presence suggests high-level interest in the ceremony. The Nexus Initiative wouldn't send operatives unless they anticipated something significant," Alaric mused as the message ended. "They must know we're making a move against the artifact." "Or they have their own plans for it during the ceremony," Lyra suggested. "Either way, it complicates matters. We need to adjust our approach account for their presence." They modified their strategy accordingly, adding contingency plans for Nexus Initiative interference. The additional complication was unwelcome, but not unexpected. Any operation of this significance would naturally attract attention from those with vested interests in the artifact. As twilight descended, they departed the research station, moving through the canyon network with a caution born of long experience in hostile environments. The Sand Tribe escorts did not reappear, but Lyra detected subtle signs of their presence: disturbed sand patterns, faint impressions of strider tracks, the occasional glint of watching eyes from shadowed crevices. They were being observed, but not hindered. A tacit approval of their mission, perhaps, or simply the tribe's characteristic neutrality toward conflicts that did not directly threaten their territories. The journey to the temple perimeter took 4 hours of careful navigation through increasingly patrolled areas. As they neared the university ruins, now largely incorporated into the adherents' temple complex, the frequency of guard patrols increased dramatically. Twice they were forced to take cover as anti-gravity skiffs passed overhead, their searchlights sweeping the terrain in systematic patterns. The temple itself was an imposing structure rising from the center of the university ruins, like a massive crystal formation. Its spires, designed to capture and refract the light of the twin suns, gleamed even in the moonlight, creating an ethereal corona above the complex. Beneath this impressive superstructure lay the original university buildings, now repurposed as the inner sanctums of the adherent faith. From their position behind a partially collapsed wall at the perimeter, Lyra and Alaric observed the temple's main entrance, where a steady stream of pilgrims arrived for the upcoming ceremony. Each was subjected to thorough scanning and verification before being permitted entry. "We won't get through the main entrance," Lyra murmured, adjusting her optical enhancers to study the security measures. "Even with disguises, their scanning technology would detect our weapons and my suit systems." "We don't need to," Alaric replied, directing her attention to a less visible side entrance, where service personnel were bringing in supplies. Eldrin noted this access point is used primarily by the support staff, food preparation, sanitation, maintenance. Security is lighter, focused more on preventing theft than detecting infiltration. And you think we can pass as service personnel? With these, yes. Alaric produced two small devices from his pack identity spoofers, programmed with credentials that would register as legitimate to standard security systems. Eldrin provided them. They're loaded with the profiles of actual temple staff who are off-duty during the convergence ceremony. It was a solid approach, though, not without risks. Lyra adjusted her suit configuration to minimize its more distinctive features, bringing it closer in appearance to standard work attire. With the addition of the desert robes they had worn during their journey, they could reasonably pass as temple maintenance staff at a casual glance. They approached the service entrance using the cover of a supply caravan, a convoy of hover carts carrying food and ceremonial materials for the upcoming event. The security checkpoint was staffed by 2 guards, who appeared more bored than vigilant, processing the steady stream of workers with perfunctory scans and minimal scrutiny. Lyra and Alaric joined the flow of personnel, timing their approach to coincide with a particularly large group of food service workers. When they reached the checkpoint, Alaric presented their spoofed credentials with the weary demeanor of someone who had performed this routine countless times. The guard barely glanced at the identification before waving them through, more interested in returning to his conversation with his colleague than in thoroughly verifying yet another pair of workers. Inside the temple was a hive of activity. Service personnel rushed through corridors carrying supplies and making final preparations for the ceremony. Adherent acolytes in varying ranks of ceremonial attire directed the efforts, their attention focused on the minutiae of ritual requirements rather than security concerns. Lyra and Alaric moved with purpose, following the route they had memorized from Eldrin's schematics. Their destination was a storage area near the reliquary, where they could establish a temporary position to monitor the movements of Third Acolyte Varus. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the temple, Lyra became aware of a subtle pressure at the edges of her consciousness, a faint whisper that seemed to originate from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Her suite's psionic dampeners activated, automatically neutralizing the effect, but the implication was clear. They were within range of the artifact's influence. "Do you feel it?" she asked Alaric in a low voice, as they paused at an intersection to allow a group of adherents to pass. He nodded grimly. "It's stronger than I expected at this distance. The adherents must be using amplification technology to extend its range throughout the temple. The Sand Tribes mentioned spirit sense being used to search for us. If the artifact's influence is being actively directed, then we need to move quickly. The ceremony preparations will require the high adherents' full attention soon, which should reduce the likelihood of focused searching." They continued through the temple, adapting their route to avoid concentrations of adherents when possible. The pressure in Lyra's mind remained a constant reminder of the danger they faced. Without her suit's protection, she would be vulnerable to the artifact's influence, a sobering thought considering what she had witnessed in the Eridani footage. Alaric, she noticed, showed no outward signs of being affected. Either his mental discipline was exceptional, or his prolonged exposure during the events at Eridani had granted him some degree of natural resistance. They reached the storage area without incident and sequestered themselves behind stacked crates of ceremonial supplies. From this position, they had a clear view of the corridor leading to the reliquary, while remaining concealed from casual observation. According to the schedule, Varus should arrive within the next 20 minutes, Alaric whispered, checking the chronometer on his wrist. She'll spend approximately 15 minutes preparing the ceremonial artifacts, then return to the main sanctuary. That gives us a narrow window to intercept her, acquire the key, and access the reliquary ourselves, Lyra confirmed. I'll take point on the intercept. Your face is more likely to be recognized than mine. Alaric nodded in agreement. They settled into watchful silence, 2 predators waiting for their opportunity. The minutes passed with excruciating slowness. Temple activity continued around them, but none approached their concealed position. Finally, Lyra's enhanced vision detected movement at the far end of the corridor, a solitary figure in the elaborate robes of a high-ranking adherent. Third acolyte. Varys moved with purpose, her youthful features set in an expression of solemn concentration as she approached the reliquary entrance. She paused before the secured door, removing an ornate key from within her robes. The key, Lyra noted, was not a simple mechanical device, but a complex crystalline structure that appeared to resonate with energy. Varys inserted the key into what appeared to be a solid section of wall beside the door. The wall shimmered, revealing a hidden locking mechanism. With a practiced motion, she turned the key, and the reliquary door slid open silently. Lyra moved the moment Varys disappeared inside, signaling for Alaric to maintain his position. She approached the reliquary entrance with the silent efficiency that had made her reputation as the Huntress, calculating angles, timing possibilities. When Varys emerged 15 minutes later, Lyra was waiting in the shadows of an architectural feature adjacent to the entrance. She allowed the acolyte to secure the door and take 3 steps away before making her move. The intercept was swift and precise. A targeted pressure point strike to momentarily disorient, followed by a neural disruptor applied to the base of the skull, non-lethal, but immediately incapacitating. Varys collapsed without a sound caught by Lyra before she could hit the floor. Alaric joined her, immediately helping to move the unconscious acolyte into a nearby alcove used for storage. They secured her with restraints that would hold until well after the ceremony was complete, and Lyra retrieved the crystalline key from within her robes. "She'll be unconscious for at least 2 hours," Lyra confirmed, checking the acolyte's pulse. "And when she wakes, the neural disruptor will leave her disoriented with temporary memory gaps around the time of the attack." Alaric nodded, already examining the key. "This is Araduni technology integrated with newer components. The adherents have adapted it for their purposes, but the core functionality remains the same. Will it work for us? Any biometric or psionic authentication built in?" "I don't believe so. The Araduni designed their security systems around knowledge rather than identity. Knowing how to use the key correctly was the authentication." He studied the crystalline structure. "The resonance pattern is the key, not the physical object itself." They returned to the reliquary entrance, where Alaric carefully reproduced Varys's actions, inserting the key into the seemingly solid wall and turning it with the same measured motion they had observed. The hidden mechanism responded, and the door slid open once more. The reliquary beyond was a testament to both ancient Araduni craftsmanship and adherent reverence. The circular chamber was lined with niches containing artifacts of varying ages and origins, each illuminated by focused light that emphasized its unique properties. At the center stood a pedestal of more recent construction, bearing what was clearly the ceremonial garment the high adherent would wear during the convergence. "The counterpart device should be here," Alaric whispered, moving to a section of the chamber that corresponded to the original university security control room on Eldrin's schematics. Lyra maintained a position near the entrance, alert for any approach, while Alaric searched among the artifacts. The pressure in her mind had intensified within the reliquary, suggesting proximity to something related to the artifact itself, perhaps fragments or associated technology used in the ceremony. Found it," Alaric announced after tense minutes of searching. He carefully removed a cylindrical object from its niche, the silencer matching the holographic image they had studied at the research station. Its surface was covered with the same intricate geometric patterns as the artifact fragment, though arranged in what appeared to be a deliberately inverse configuration. "Are you certain?" Lyra asked, joining him to examine the device. "It appears dormant." "It should be. According to Eldrin's research, it activates only in direct proximity to the artifact itself." Alaric secured the silencer in a shielded container designed to prevent detection by the temple's scanning systems. Now for Phase 2. They exited the reliquary, carefully resealing the door behind them. According to their plan, they would separate here Alaric would create a diversion in the temple's lower levels, drawing security away from the Hall of Whispers, while Lyra would position herself for entry into the hall during the height of the convergence ceremony. "Comlink check," Lyra murmured, testing the discreet communication device Eldrin had provided. "Confirmed," Alaric's voice responded in her ear. "Maintaining radio silence until the diversion is initiated. 30 minutes from now." Lyra nodded. "If anything goes wrong." "Proceed with the mission," Alaric interrupted firmly. "The artifact must be neutralized, whatever the cost." There was a gravity to his words that resonated with Lyra's own sense of purpose. Whatever their past, whatever had brought them to this moment, they were united in the understanding that their individual fates were secondary to the larger objective. "Good hunting," she said, simply offering the traditional farewell of her clan. A flicker of recognition passed across Alaric's features. "And to you, Huntress." They parted ways, each moving with confidence, born of thorough preparation and shared purpose. Lyra navigated through increasingly busy corridors as adherents and pilgrims gathered for the ceremony. Her worker's garb and purposeful manner continued to provide effective camouflage amid the preparations. She positioned herself in a service alcove with line of sight to the Hall of Whispers, settling in to wait for Alaric's diversion. The pressure in her mind continued, though her suit's dampeners kept it manageable. Around her, she noted with growing concern, many of the temple workers moved with a subtle uniformity of purpose that suggested collective influence, not complete control, but a shared nudging toward specific behaviors and reactions. The artifact was active, its influence spreading throughout the temple complex in preparation for the ceremony. 28 minutes after they separated, Alaric's voice came through the comlink, terse and urgent. "Change of plans. Nexus Initiative operatives identified moving toward the Hall of Whispers. 5 in total, led by Command Operative. Possible extraction mission in progress." Lyra tensed. "Do you have visual confirmation of their objective?" "Affirmative. They're carrying specialized containment equipment. I believe they intend to remove the artifact during the ceremony's peak, when the adherents will be most vulnerable due to divided attention." "Can you intercept?" "Negative. They're too well equipped and there are temple guards accompanying them. They appear to have high-level clearance." Lyra processed this development swiftly. The Nexus Initiative's plan to extract the artifact during the ceremony could work to their advantage, or completely derail their mission depending on timing. "Maintain your position," she decided. "I'm moving to the hall now ahead of schedule. We need to neutralize the artifact before they can remove it." "Understood. Be advised the command operative matches Draven's description. Proceed with extreme caution." Draven, the architect of the Eridani massacre, the man who had worn Alaric's face and used his authority to commit atrocities. The revelation sent a surge of cold focus through Lyra's system. The true target of her vengeance was here within reach. But vengeance was no longer her primary mission. The artifact had to be neutralized first. Lyra moved with renewed purpose, discarding her worker's disguise to reveal her hunting suit beneath. The Hall of Whispers was guarded as expected, but the deployment of security had shifted in response to the Nexus Initiative's presence, creating gaps in the coverage. She exploited one such gap, using her suit's advanced stealth systems to approach the hall's secondary entrance, a maintenance access point identified in Eldrin's schematics. The lock required higher clearance than she possessed, but Lyra wasn't restricted to legitimate methods of entry. A focused application of her disruptor, at a specific frequency, caused the lock's internal mechanism to reset, creating a 3-second window for manual override. The Hall of Whispers lived up to its name. As Lyra slipped inside, the pressure in her mind intensified dramatically, becoming a chorus of unintelligible whispers that seemed to emanate from the very air. Her suit's dampeners struggled to compensate, operating at maximum capacity. The chamber was vast, its ceiling rising into darkness above. Ancient Eriduni architecture blended seamlessly with adherent modifications, creating a space that felt simultaneously technological and sacred. At the center, elevated on a dais of polished stone, stood what could only be the artifact itself. Lyra's first thought was that it was smaller than she had imagined, approximately 1 meter in height. Its form, an impossible geometric shape that seemed to shift subtly when not directly observed. Its surface was the same black glass as the fragment they had seen in Eldrin's lab, but assembled into a complete form. It radiated a presence that was palpable, even through her suit's protection. Surrounding the dais were 12 adherents in elaborate ceremonial attire, arranged in a precise pattern that Lyra recognized from Eldrin's research as a configuration designed to amplify the artifact's influence. They appeared to be in a trance-like state, their attention fully focused on the artifact, their lips moving in synchronized silent prayer. The hall had multiple entrances, and Lyra quickly spotted the one that would likely be used by the Nexus Initiative operatives, a formal doorway opposite her position currently secured, but showing signs of recent access. She needed to reach the artifact before they arrived, which meant navigating past the entranced adherents without alerting them. She activated her suit's full stealth capabilities, knowing it would drain her power reserves rapidly, but provide the best chance of reaching the artifact undetected. Moving with the slow, deliberate steps of a hunter stalking wary prey, she began her approach, keeping to the shadows at the perimeter of the chamber. The adherents remained focused on their ritual, unaware of her presence. As she drew closer to the artifact, the whispers in her mind grew more distinct, occasionally forming words or phrases in languages she recognized, and many she did not. The effect was disorienting, requiring conscious effort to maintain her focus on the physical world around her. She was halfway to the artifact when the main entrance to the hall began to open, the massive doors sliding apart with ceremonial slowness. Lyra froze, calculating. If this was the high adherent arriving for the ceremony, her window of opportunity would close. If it was the Nexus Initiative team, conflict was inevitable. It was neither. Professor Eldrin entered the hall alone, his academic robes replaced by the traditional garb of an Araduni scholar priest, an identity long extinct, but still recognized and respected by the adherents. He moved with purpose toward the entranced adherents, who stirred at his approach, but did not appear alarmed. "Honored ones," Eldrin's voice carried clearly across the chamber. "The alignment approaches. The Whisperer must be prepared for the convergence." The lead adherent, not the high adherent Lyra, noted, but a senior acolyte responded with visible confusion. "The preparation ritual is not yet complete. The high adherent has granted special dispensation for my participation." Eldrin interrupted smoothly, producing what appeared to be an official token of authorization. "My studies of the ancient texts have revealed an aspect of the preparation that has been overlooked in recent convergences." The adherents conferred briefly, examining the token with reverence. Lyra recognized Eldrin's strategy, creating confusion and distraction through legitimate channels, providing her with extended cover for her approach. While the adherent's attention was diverted, she resumed her careful progress toward the artifact. 3 meters from the dais, she removed the silencer from its shielded container, feeling it vibrate gently in her hand as it registered proximity to the artifact. According to Eldrin's research, activation was simple. The silencer needed only to be placed within 1 meter of the artifact, where it would automatically detect and respond to the quantum resonance pattern. Lyra was 2 steps from the dais when multiple events occurred simultaneously. The secondary entrance burst open as Nexus Initiative operatives flooded into the hall, weapons drawn. The main entrance reopened to admit the high adherent resplendent in ceremonial regalia, and from somewhere above a shadow dropped with controlled precision, Alaric abandoning his diversion to join the confrontation in the hall. The adherents reacted with shock and outrage, their trance broken by the sudden chaos. The Nexus operatives advanced their leader, a man whose features Lyra recognized from Eldrin's files, as Draven, issuing calm, authoritative commands that seemed to carry unnatural weight. "Stand down. The artifact is being secured by United Systems Authority. Any interference will be considered hostile action." The adherents hesitated, caught between their devotion to the artifact and the compelling influence in Draven's voice. Lyra realized he was using a fragment of the artifact himself, likely incorporated into the distinctive collar device he wore. She had seconds before the situation deteriorated completely. With a final surge of movement, she leapt onto the dais, silencer extended toward the artifact. "Huntress down!" Alaric's voice rang out as he engaged the nearest Nexus operative, creating a momentary barrier between Lyra and Draven. She dropped instinctively, feeling energy fire pass over her head. The silencer made contact with the base of the artifact's platform and immediately began to emit a high-pitched tone that cut through the cacophony of the hall. The whispers in Lyra's mind intensified painfully, then abruptly ceased as the silencer's frequency established itself. The artifact's surface, which had been subtly shifting, became suddenly rigid, its geometric form fixed in space. Draven's expression transformed from confident command to shock, then rage. "Stop her!" he shouted, his voice now stripped of its unnatural influence. "The artifact is being compromised." The Nexus operatives moved to comply, but their advance was impeded by unexpected resistance. The adherents, freed from the subtle influence that had made Draven's commands so compelling, had turned on the intruders, defending their sacred artifact with fanatical determination. Alaric fought his way to Lyra's position, his military training evident in the economy and precision of his movements. "The silencer is working," he confirmed, noting the artifact's changed state. "But we need to maintain its position until the process completes." "How long?" Lyra asked, already calculating defensive positions. 3 minutes, according to Eldrin's research. An eternity, in combat terms. They needed to hold the dais against both Nexus operatives and potentially hostile adherents for 180 seconds. The situation was further complicated by the arrival of Temple security responding to the disturbance. They entered the hall, with weapons drawn, uncertain where to direct their attention in the chaotic scene. Adherents fighting Nexus operatives, the High Adherent shouting contradictory commands, and 2 strangers at the artifact itself. "Eldrin," Alaric called out, spotting the professor, attempting to mediate between the adherents and Temple security. "The evidence now." Eldrin responded, immediately activating a device that projected a holographic display, visible throughout the hall. The footage of the Eridani massacre appeared, showing the false Alaric Draven orchestrating the attack. "Behold the truth." Eldrin's voice cut through the chaos. "The artifact has been used to manipulate and control, to commit atrocities in the name of others. The man who wears the face of command," he pointed dramatically at Draven, "is the true architect of the Eridani genocide." The projection shifted to show Draven's face, side by side, with the imposter from the footage, highlighting the subtle similarities that confirmed his identity, despite the cosmetic alterations he had undergone. The revelation created momentary confusion, a pause in the conflict that Lyra and Alaric exploited to strengthen their position around the artifact. The silencer continued its high-pitched emission, and the artifact's surface had begun to develop hairline fractures, releasing brief flashes of energy. "It's working," Alaric confirmed, his expression grim but satisfied. "The quantum structure is destabilizing." Draven, recognizing the imminent failure of his mission, abandoned subtlety for direct action. He fired on the adherents, blocking his path, cutting them down with clinical efficiency as he advanced toward the dais. "You've ruined years of planning," he snarled, his refined manner giving way to cold fury. "Do you have any idea what that artifact could have accomplished in the right hands? The peace it could have established?" "Peace through control is no peace at all," Alaric replied, positioning himself between Draven and the artifact. "I saw what your peace looked like at Eridani. Necessary sacrifices for the greater good. Something a military man should understand." Draven raised his weapon, targeting Alaric with calculated precision. "Your reputation was already destroyed. Your death will simply provide closure to an unfortunate chapter." Before he could fire, a kinetic round struck his shoulder, spinning him off balance. Lyra had drawn her backup weapon, the simple pistol that had proven its worth once more. That was for the Kale clan, she said, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Draven recovered quickly, his training evident in his ability to compartmentalize pain. He redirected his attack toward Lyra, but Alaric intercepted, engaging him in close combat that negated his ranged weapon advantage. The two men fought with the intensity of long-standing enemies, finally confronting each other directly. Alaric's military discipline against Draven's covert operative training, each seeking the advantage that would determine not just their personal conflict, but the fate of the artifact and the truth it represented. Around them, the battle in the hall had shifted. The adherents influenced by Eldrin's revelation and the visible effects of the silencer on their sacred artifact had turned against the Nexus operatives. Temple security, equally impacted by the evidence presented, had joined forces with the adherents in defense of the temple. The artifact's fractures had spread across its entire surface, now light spilling from within, like a star collapse in slow motion. The silencer's tone had shifted to a lower frequency, indicating the final phase of the neutralization process. 30 seconds remaining. Lyra maintained her position by the artifact, ensuring the silencer remained in contact, despite the increasing instability of the dais itself, which had begun to crack under the stress of the energies being released. 20 seconds. Alaric gained the upper hand in his struggle with Draven, leveraging his greater physical strength to pin the operative against a nearby column. "This ends now," he growled, securing Draven's arms in an immobilizing hold. 10 seconds. The artifact's surface had become a network of light, the black glass now more absence than presence. The silencer's tone reached its lowest point, then abruptly ceased. In the sudden silence, the artifact shattered, not in a violent explosion, but in a gentle cascade of crystalline fragments that dissolved into motes of light before they reached the floor. What remained on the dais was a small, unremarkable stone sphere, devoid of the presence that had filled the hall moments before. The neutralization was complete. The Whisperer had been silenced. The effect on those present was immediate. The adherents looked disoriented, as if waking from a dream. The Nexus operatives, deprived of the advantage provided by Draven's artifact fragment, found themselves overwhelmed by temple security and surrendered. Draven himself seemed diminished, his commanding presence reduced to that of an ordinary man, skilled and dangerous still, but no longer carrying the aura of unnatural authority that had defined him. "It's over," Alaric told him, maintaining his hold. "The artifact is neutralized. The evidence of your actions at Eridani has been secured and distributed to multiple sources. There will be an accounting." Draven's expression shifted from rage to a cold, calculating assessment of his position. "You think this changes anything? The Nexus Initiative has contingencies. Records can be altered, witnesses discredited. Your word against the established narrative of a disgraced general." "Not just his word," Lyra interjected, approaching with her weapon still trained on Draven. "The testimony of a recognized shadow hunter, with the support of Professor Eldrin's evidence, and the adherents who have witnessed the truth today." And the Sand Tribes added a new voice, as a delegation of tribespeople entered the hall, led by the guide who had escorted Lyra and Alaric to the research station. "We bear witness to the false speaker's deception. We have watched from the shadows, recorded with ancient eyes." The tribal leader held up a device of clearly Araduni origin, a recording apparatus that had captured the events in the hall from multiple angles, impossible to dismiss or alter. Draven's composure finally cracked, the reality of his situation becoming clear. His carefully constructed operation had not merely failed. It had been exposed in a way that no amount of Nexus Initiative influence could contain. As Temple security took Draven into custody, Lyra turned her attention to the neutralized artifact, or what remained of it. The unremarkable stone sphere sat inert on the dais, its true nature and terrible potential locked away by the silencer's intervention. "What will happen to it?" she asked as Alaric joined her. "Eldrin has arrangements with the Galactic Archaeological Council. They'll secure it in a facility designed for containing hazardous relics, with multiple layers of oversight to prevent misuse." Lyra nodded, satisfied with the answer. Her mission, though transformed beyond recognition from its original purpose, was complete. The artifact was neutralized, the true culprit of the Eridani massacre exposed, and most importantly, her clan's honor would be restored when the evidence became public. The aftermath unfolded with the methodical precision of well-executed justice. The Nexus Initiative operatives, including Draven, were taken into custody by United Systems authorities, alerted by Eldrin's network of academic contacts. The evidence of their actions at Eridani Colony and their subsequent manipulation of the artifact was presented to the Galactic Council, leading to formal inquiries and eventually convictions. Alaric's name was officially cleared, his record restored, though he declined the offer to return to active service. Instead, he chose to work with Eldrin, using his military expertise to help identify and secure dangerous artifacts that could pose similar threats if misused. The adherents, freed from the subtle influence of the artifact, underwent a painful but necessary reformation of their faith. Many abandoned the order entirely, but others, including the High Adherent, chose to redirect their spiritual devotion toward genuine study of Eridune's ancient wisdom without the corrupting presence of the artifact's whispers. And Lyra, the Huntress, found herself at a crossroads. For 3 years, her existence had been defined by the pursuit of vengeance. With that purpose fulfilled, albeit in a manner she could never have anticipated, what remained. The answer came not in the form of a new hunt or a new target, but in an invitation. The Galactic Council, impressed by her role in exposing the Nexus Initiative's operations, offered her a position as a special envoy to regions destabilized by similar covert manipulations. Her skills as a hunter would be repurposed for diplomacy and reconciliation, using her unique perspective to bridge divides between groups manipulated into conflict. It was not a future she would have chosen for herself 3 years ago. Yet, as she stood on the observation deck of the Council vessel, departing Eridune, watching the desert planet with its twin red suns recede into the distance, Lyra felt something she had not experienced since before Eridani possibility. Beside her stood Alaric, now a colleague rather than a target, his expression reflecting a similar cautious optimism. "The Kale clan would be proud," he said, breaking the contemplative silence. "You've done more than avenge them. You've ensured their sacrifice has meaning." Lyra considered this. "I'm not certain about pride, but I think they would recognize justice even in this unexpected form." "And you? What does the Huntress recognize in this new path?" She studied the stars emerging as they left the atmosphere, each a potential destination, a new world with its own challenges and opportunities. "Potential," she said finally. "Not the end of the hunt, but a change in what's being sought." She glanced at him, acknowledging the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. "We both sought truth in our ways. Perhaps now we can help others find theirs." Alaric nodded, understanding the weight of what remained unsaid, the shared trauma, the parallel journeys of loss and rediscovery, the unlikely alliance that had led to something resembling redemption for them both. As the vessel accelerated to faster-than-light speed, the stars elongated into brilliant streaks of light, a visual metaphor for the transformation of their respective paths. The Huntress and the General, once hunter and prey, now moving forward together into an uncertain but purposeful future. Not the end of their story, but perhaps the beginning of a better one.